Huh. Been a while since I did a car video, hasn't it? Well, you know what? We're doing another one! Now, just like last time, we're going to be doing this in order of level of badness. So in 1985, there was apparently the idea to revive the Plymouth Cuda name. This entry is brief, but man, what a lousy vehicle this would have been. It's just a badge-engineered Dodge Charger, which in simple terms means that it's an Omni with a mild power boost. Now, the level of badge engineering that Chrysler carried out during the malaise era was completely egregious and rightfully infamous, but the vehicle that they've chose to badge engineer makes absolutely no sense. For a bit of history, in 1978, the Dodge Challenger name was dug up from its rather shallow grave and fittingly badge-engineered onto a Mitsubishi Galant. Well, this particular Chalant had a Plymouth counterpart, which was called the Sapporo. If there was ever a time to badge engineer a new Cuda, this would have been the time to do it, seeing as its counterpart was literally carrying the name Challenger. You know, the car the Cuda shared a platform with back in happier times. I guess they realized they had kind of missed the bus in '85 and they wanted to try and make up for lost ground, but now the Challenger name is yet again deceased, and as a result they decide of all cars to go and use as a basis for this low-effort sticker job, the Dodge Charger, which makes literally no sense when you consider the name Cuda was only used on the Challenger-based car. Now, in defense of the higher-ups at Plymouth, if they wanted something that would have been more logical, they could have gone with the Roadrunner name, but I think that genuinely would have provoked a second American Civil War. Then again, considering people's views of the Charger in the mid-80s, the use of the name Cuda may have also been a step too far. Thankfully, said second American Civil War didn't come, as Chrysler rather wisely kept this idea on the back burner and then eventually threw it out. Now, the original Mystique, not to be confused with the equally ironically named vehicle that debuted in 1995, was, as you can already tell, a van, though is practically marketed as a cross between a station wagon and a multi-purpose luxury vehicle. Whatever that means. So what were the selling points of this concept van? Well, its really big mechanical selling point was the fact that it was fitted with the unconventional and still kinda cool T-Drive system. For those of you who are totally not like myself and have never heard of the T-Drive until this very moment, to keep it simple, T-Drive was a design concept for mounting an inline engine transversely while still having the transmission mounting longitudinally. It sounds mental, and it frankly kind of is, as power is sent from the transverse engine to the transmission through a special gearing mechanism, which forms what was described in the patent as a cross-axis configuration. Due to the transmission being mounted in such a way, this allows for the transmission to still have an output for rear-wheel drive if needed, which would make producing front-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, or all-wheel drive vehicles incredibly cost-effective, as they could all rely on the same transmission. The craziest thing is they apparently even prototyped the system and tested it in a Ford Tempo and a Ford Thunderbird, which both were fitted with a unique inline 8-cylinder engine. Anyway, I went on a tangent. Back to the van! Now, the other big selling point with this concept was its manufacturing flexibility. This vehicle could be fitted with either a 4, 5, 6, or even 8-cylinder engine, which came with the alleged benefit of the capability of using high-displacement engines without increasing vehicle size. It's good they considered such a factor, considering the fact the vehicle looks like it's already the size of a small country. Anyway, the interior was where the primary focus was with this concept, as the vehicle was fitted with 6 bucket seats, with these bucket seats being fitted with small television screens and VCRs in the back of them all, which were independently controlled. One can only hope everyone brought headphones, otherwise the sensory overload is going to cause a crash. One of the other big techie features of the Mystique was its liquid crystal roof, which was automatically darkened when exposed to bright sunlight. Basically, the top of the vehicle was a giant transition lens you find on a pair of glasses. I wonder if, just like a pair of transition lenses, the process begins to fail after long enough, or if it takes longer to dim when it's cold out. Anyway, now you're probably wondering why this car is in a video called The Worst American Concept Cars Part 2. Isn't it obvious? It's the styling. Or I should say the lack thereof. The Toyota Previa finally has a worthy opponent for the biggest globule of motor transport. I mean, the styling on this vehicle could have had one major advantage. Say you rob a bank and this is the getaway car. All the witnesses are going to have a very hard time describing it to the police. Yes, Mr. Witness, what did the vehicle look like? It was round, bulbous. Any distinguishing features? I mean, it was round, like, really round. You know, everyone gives the Pacer a hard time for being a fishbowl, but man, this thing could only be described as a lump of car with a pair of grab handles disguised as mirrors attached to the door. I would like to hereby coin the 1991 Mercury Mystique as the Mercury Grand Bulbous. Law enforcement everywhere sighed in relief when they realized that this thing would never enter production and was instead replaced by one of the most mediocre sedans ever seen. Now, in case you have somehow been living under a suspiciously automobile-shaped rock for the last 63 years, the Jeep Wagoneer is pretty much the vehicle that helped spawn what we call the modern SUV. Its body style had remained practically unchanged throughout its original production run from 1963 to 1991. Well, seeing this apparently distressing fact, Chrysler decided to create a concept of what the Wagoneer could look like in the coming years, and what they came up with was this. Yeah, I think somebody in the styling department thought this was a Dodge project and corporate just decided to roll with it since he had already gotten halfway through it. Anyway, they unveiled the new Wagoneer concept at the 1991 Detroit Auto Show, with its big selling point being its luxury appointments. This vehicle was to feature 6 bucket seats with nifty things such as a TV, complete with a VCR and CD player, which I imagine Mercury was probably having a good chuckle, seeing as they had 6 of these in their glorified egg timer. Well, Jeep's designers must have realized that they kind of didn't make entry in the vehicle easy, so they added some built-in steps in the door jambs, which lowered when the doors were opened. It also featured flush-mounted raisable roof racks, because that's apparently something someone needed. Now, in case you haven't already noticed, I haven't shown you the side profile of the vehicle yet. Well, there's a reason for that. For those with delicate retinas, I suggest you avert your eyes now. I have no clue what happened during the styling process, but it looks like someone got carried away with the smudge tool on their computer when they were designing it. This vehicle is truly one of the most proportionally rancid vehicles I have ever seen. It's a car that looks like it would be right at home in the background of an AI-generated image. Now, I believe another interesting thing to point out about this vehicle is that it's 80 inches wide, a whopping 3 inches wider than the AMC Pacer. Yes, this blobular utility vehicle is almost 7 feet wide. It's also 16.5 feet long. So this vehicle did pay tribute to one major part of the original Wagoneer's heritage. It's absolutely massive. It's just a pity the styling department had a mental lapse and kind of forgot their job while designing it. So in turn, you are occupying a comedically large portion of the road in a vehicle whose looks honestly would make any owner hope their vehicle fades into the abyss. But thankfully, for the sanity of motorists everywhere, this concept never went into production. Now, the mid-50s Thunderbird is pretty much one of the major embodiments of the jet age of American automobile styling, but in 1956, Ford decided to take the Thunderbird's jet age element up a notch. How did they do this? With the installation of a Boeing 8C gas turbine engine. Yes, years before the famous Chrysler turbine cars, Ford had created this proof-of-concept vehicle to test the viability of such a powertrain. Incredibly, we actually have a small amount of the observations noted during the testing of this vehicle, which are still available to us in the modern day. If only the military project stuff could be so generous. Anyway, according to the surviving document, the vehicle was initially completed and had its first trial run in January of 1956, with a demonstration for corporate being carried out in February and then the actual test program beginning in March of that year. Testing showed that this new powertrain demonstrated good medium speed and acceleration performance and had a good power-to-weight ratio, with no engine vibration, and required less maintenance than the typical cast-iron kiloton internal combustion engines of the day. Unfortunately, this powertrain had also demonstrated some less than desirable characteristics, such as acceleration lag that would make a Messerschmitt 262 seem brisk, a high price tag of what amounts to $2.3 million in development funds burned, as well as, and I quote, numerous other characteristics that represented problem areas. One issue that is given a decent amount of attention is the undesirability of the front exhaust arrangement, which, yeah, I would say it's probably not a good idea to go throwing superheated air directly out of the driver's side of the car. Not only is it potentially dangerous to your lower extremities, but also fellow motorists won't likely appreciate you driving by and scorching their paint or turning their sidewalls to putty. Another issue that is entirely speculative, but I don't think is highly unlikely, is a similar issue that plagued the Chrysler turbine: disastrous fuel economy. Chrysler's setup worked well enough at highway speeds, but normal in-traffic driving led to a, how we say, lot of economical unpleasantries. Well, Ford apparently couldn't get the system worked out, and further development seems to have just kind of up and died. Instead, Ford decided to pursue a much more sane propulsion source: nuclear. Tell me something, what do you think would make for a good people carrier? Perhaps multiple rows of comfortable seating, good cargo capacity, versatility? During this thought process, did making the automotive equivalent of the hen and chick ever come to mind? No? Well, apparently this wasn't the case for Tom Gale, yes, that Tom Gale of Dodge Viper and Plymouth Prowler fame, who decided that a modular minivan would be the car of the future. So what was his logic behind such a thing? Well, unfortunately for the automotive world, the EPA, along with many other semi-legitimate organizations, was raising concerns over greenhouse gas emissions, and as such, automakers began looking into much greener subcompact cars. Just one problem: everyone's buying minivans. So how do you satisfy both the government and the consumer? You give them both in one vehicle! When this not-so-mini minivan was unveiled at the 1990 Detroit Auto Show, the sales pitch included slogans such as "socially responsible vehicle within a vehicle," proclaiming it a challenge to conventional automotive design, and that it was intended to address future transportation issues. The way this Decepticon is supposed to function in the wild is the microcar, which acts as the cab in the front, will lower its retracted axle onto the ground and will then unlock and detach from the van body to enable the vehicle to be more economical in city driving. And when you need a bit more carry capacity, just reconnect the microcar to the van body and now you can set off again, only with a lot more cargo and a lot more kids to torture by taking them to school in this. Bob Lutz, who was the head of Chrysler at the time, justified this unworldly design by expositing, "You see people going into downtown areas in full-size vans wasting fuel and clogging up space. It seemed to us like a neat idea to be able to leave 2/3 of your vehicle at home." Now, as if that wasn't enough, here's where things become even more crazy. You're probably wondering what powers this behemoth. Well, it's a 1.5-liter 4-cylinder engine. Now, before you have a lack of power-induced heart attack, there is good news. The rear section has its own engine, which is a 2.2-liter turbo 4-cylinder, which is connected electronically to the smaller engine, with the two engines providing a combined horsepower of about 250. With the rear section engaged, the vehicle was also effectively all-wheel drive. What is confusing is the vehicle allows the rear engine to be disengaged while driving, which was claimed to be for when you are running a lower payload, but I can't imagine trying to drive this thing on one tiny 4-banger. There was plans for future alternative powertrain options, such as one which envisioned the microcar being electric, and different rear sections such as a flatbed pickup rear module or a boat trailer module, which was basically physical DLC. Now, some of the more notable technical appointments include a rear camera with an overhead console-mounted TV screen, which had to be added to aid the microcar driver when docking the vehicle with the van module. It also had dual AC and heating units, one for each module, and what was pitched as a state-of-the-art stereo with individual headphone jacks. So we've reviewed all this stuff, so what exactly makes it one of the worst other than the styling? Well, one major issue is the rear module is left wide open when the microcar is detached, meaning if you leave it anywhere, someone's either gonna live out of it or ransack it. It also means the interior has no protection from the elements, so unless you have a garage at your home, don't leave the van module behind when there's rain in the forecast. Another notable issue is the fact your passengers in the van cannot communicate with those in the microcar, which led industry insiders to rather hilariously dub the van module as the mother-in-law module. Yet another issue to consider is the sheer complexity of this design, which has to not only account for the microcar linking with the van module, but also has to account for linking the powertrain and lifting the microcar's rear axle. Maintenance wouldn't be fun either, as you effectively have to buy double the fluids you would for a normal car, as you have 2 engines and 2 transmissions to worry about. Another issue that I predict would have riddled this design is sealing problems between the microcar and the van module, which would have not only led to some wet floors, but also an unreasonable amount of wind noise. I'm not even going to comment on passenger safety in the van module, other than the microcar would likely be all too tempted to nest itself entirely within it in a severe enough crash. The funniest part here is the reason that it was never put into production is not due to any of this. It's due almost exclusively to cost, because the cost to build it and then the unreasonable amount of money the consumer would have to pay to acquire it would mean that it wouldn't have sold, so the project was scrapped. Now, I have saved the truly worst one for last, a product of the one and only boat engine manufacturer Evinrude. Behold the Rooney Lakester, What I can only imagine was pitched at some corporate board meeting like this. So you know the Amphicar, what if we like overcomplicated the whole thing and got rid of any practicality? And then the best part is someone in the meeting room said, I'm in! Alright, so from first appearances it already looks totally ridiculous, and the reason it looks so ridiculous is fittingly equally ridiculous. So unlike a normal amphibious car that just simply drives into the water and lowers a propeller and then just goes, the Rooney Lakester does something a little bit different. The car chassis on the Lakester does not go in the water. Instead, it backs up to the water and lowers the 14-foot fiberglass boat supported on the top of the chassis into the water, and from there you enjoy your day on the lake. Once you have concluded the boating, you then put the boat back onto the chassis through the use of an electric winch mounted at the front of the suspiciously boat-shaped channel on the chassis. From there, you can then drive the literal boat car home. Don't worry, we shall discuss this further in a moment. Now you're probably wondering, that boat sure does take up a lot of space. I wonder what engine the chassis uses. Well, this is where things become even more overtly absurd. According to Brooke Stevens, the vehicle's creator, the Lakester chassis was designed to be powered by the same 50 horsepower outboard motor that powers the boat. Don't worry, we shall discuss this further in a moment. Mr. Stevens also stated that the buggy, as he called it, ran on standard VW running gear and was fitted with an infinitely variable hydrostatic transmission like those found on high-power garden tractors. The Lakester would end up making the rounds at some boat shows like the San Francisco Boat Show in January 1970. The craziest thing was that according to Popular Science's March 1970 issue, the Lakester was expected to actually go on sale, and it would have been priced at $2,500. However, this never happened, and we are about to dissect the likely reasons why. One thing that you may have noticed as a potential problem is the fact the boat houses the steering for both the boat itself and the car chassis. This begs a rather important question. How does the chassis continue to steer once the boat has been unloaded from it? Also, does the boat have a hole in the bottom of it to allow the steering column to connect to the steering mechanism in the chassis? How is the steering mechanism linked? Is it done through a special linkage? If it's done through a special linkage, do you have to disconnect the linkage before unloading the boat? If you do, that means you have to reconnect the linkage while also trying to load the boat onto the chassis, which I'm sure would have been an absolute joy. Yet another issue that immediately comes to mind is the fact the outboard motor on the boat also provides power to the chassis. Well, if you unload the boat from the chassis, how does the chassis propel itself away from the water's edge? There's no mention of an electric motor to provide any kind of backup power when the outboard is disconnected, and even if this was planned, the steering and even the throttle control is not linked anymore, so the vehicle is effectively beached until the boat is reunited to the chassis. Also, how does the outboard provide power to the chassis? Is it done through a special linkage or gearbox of some kind? If so, what kind of procedure is required to disconnect and reconnect the system? Another potential problem comes to mind when considering what the chassis body is made of. If it's made from fiberglass like the boat, then no biggie. But if it's sheet metal, then it is probably not a good idea to seat a large soaking wet boat on top of it for long periods of time. Within a couple of months, the floor of the buggy is going to look like the average late 70s Chrysler product. One huge factor that cannot be overlooked is the safety of this vehicle, or lack thereof. The 1970s was when the average American, whether they wanted to be or not, was made more safety conscious thanks to the federal government. As such, a lot of things changed on American cars during the 1970s, especially during the mid-70s with the introduction of the totally not ungainly 5-mile-an-hour impact bumper. Well, this begs the question, if the Lakester was classed as an automobile, would there be any physical way to make it safe enough to be road legal? I can't help but see that 14-foot boat on the chassis becoming an overly expensive and even more lethal lawn dart in a relatively high-speed crash. I think this vehicle may have been one of the few cases where wearing your seatbelts was actually the wrong thing to do. Again, as I stated earlier, fortunately the boatmobile never materialized, though I have to admit I am kind of sad that it didn't reach production, because it would have been either hilariously terrible, or Evan Rude would have cooked and made the single coolest beach buggy in history. That'll about do it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I know it was quite a shock to have it be something automobile-related, considering that most of my recent content has been exclusively military. But anyway, I hope it was a nice change. Just want to give a special shout-out real quick to my channel members. I thank you so much to all of my comrades and comradettes. And big shout-out especially to Lord Hoth4443 of the Table Size Collective. And a massive shout-out to my members of the Monochrome, Vaki Zaraki, and Bombird205. Thank you so much to you incredible individuals, all of you, and to all of you viewers. Thank you so much for watching my content. I don't know what the next video entails. I know that I hinted something about the TOG in the last video, but that's still in the works. So, yeah. I have a Discord server, if you wish to join that. I also, if you want to become a channel member or a patron, you can get early access to videos, which is, I guess, cool, if you like that kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know what else to say here, so I'm just gonna, like, evaporate now or something. So, bye, I guess?